comes down to there's a certain amount of work that needs to get done, and there's only so many hours, labor hours we have as a service-based company. And so I don't want to push my person to 150, 200% capacity before I decide to hire. I actually want to have them at 80% capacity almost all the time.
If you'd like to earn CPE credit for listening to this episode, visit earmarkcpe.com. Download the app, take a short quiz, and get your CPE certificate. Continuing education has never been so easy. And now, on to the episode. Hey everyone, and welcome back to Earmark. I'm Blake Oliver, and today I'm joined by John Briggs. John Briggs is on a mission to revolutionize the accounting profession. As a CPA and the founder of Incite Tax, he's rejected 70-hour work weeks in favor of a radically productive approach called the 3.3 rule. His new book by the same name equips firm leaders to end the burnout epidemic while growing a thriving practice. John, welcome to Earmark.
Man, thanks for having me, Blake.
So is it 3.3, 3.3, 3.3?
Yeah.
What do you call it?
The 3.3 rule.
Okay. So that's the name of your book. Tell me, what is the 3.3 rule?
I can give you the rundown, but obviously all the context matters. But the rule simply stated is the most efficient workday consists of working up to 3 hours at a time, followed by a 30% recovery period.
3 hours at a time, followed by a 30% recovery period. So does that mean like an hour off?
It can. So it's up to 3 hours. So
Okay.
one of the things that's important, I looked at a lot of data and science for this because there's no studies that support the way we currently work.
Just 12 hours straight.
Just 12 hours straight or 70
Yeah.
hours a week. Yay. It's interesting that we're all different. And so even the concept of a straight 9 to 5 doesn't actually work for all of us with our the different makeups. And so a lot of the rule is about having awareness of yourself. And if I feel like I'm losing focus after an hour, that's totally fine. However long I work, so if I worked an hour, 30% of that, I'm going to take 20 minutes off. But if, like for me, all of the audience could probably get this. Usually I'm not talking specifically to accountants, so I'm really glad to be here. If you give me financials and like, hey, can you forecast some stuff? Man, I geek out on that stuff. I love it. So I could go full 3 hours without any issue. So then I would take a full hour off after that.
Got it. See, I love this idea, and I loved when you sent me your book, and I learned about this because I was a musician in my prior career, and all of us, I mean, nobody can practice an instrument straight all day long for 8 hours. You will harm yourself physically, right? It's an athletic thing. And I suppose you could say this about sports too. They don't practice that way, right? And so I got in the habit in college when I was practicing really hard of doing like 2-hour practice sessions. One in the morning, one in the afternoon, one in the evening. If I could do 3 in a day, that was incredible. Most of the time I would only ever do 2, right? But like it gets to your point that it's really hard to be focused and productive for more than actually a few hours a day.
Yeah, and it's interesting you bring up sports, something that didn't make it into the book. I did try to look at articles and studies and reports that people had with professional athletes. So like LeBron James regime, like his regimen and all that kind of came up. And it is interesting how there are breaks that they take. Yeah, he's not sitting at the gym shooting shots or lifting weights 8 straight hours. Like there's got to be recovery in between. I mean, literally for our muscles to actually grow, we have to have recovery. Why we haven't applied the same science to our mental capabilities, crazy to me, but there's enough data that supports this. So it just, it makes sense to me.
So I want to dig into how we actually apply this in accounting. How do we get away from the working straight 8 to 12 hours a day and do this method? But before that, I'm curious to know what led you down this path. Were you working 70 hours a week? I know you're in tax, and that's a very common experience.
So early in my career, I worked at Deloitte, And I noticed, interestingly enough, that I was going to get rewarded. I was going to get bonuses, promotions based on how many billable hours I had. And if I wanted to keep my job, I had to work at least 55 billable hours. And I was young at the time. So it's like, okay, cool. Not to mention, my entire university experience was conditioning me to, hey, accept this idea. Oh, don't worry about it. You'll work 70 hours a week, but that's okay because that's how we do it. So I kind of noticed this issue then, and talking to some of the accountants who've been around for a while, like they just weren't very happy. And oh, suck it up. I'm young. Like you guys just need to work harder. Then I fast forward a little bit after a little stint as a controller for a door-to-door sales company, became a partner in another accounting firm. And yeah, that's when it kind of started to hit me that this is not a good lifestyle. I mean, my wife sometimes at that stage in our life would comment, and she's like, I'm a single mother. And I broke my heart because it's like, but we're in this together. And so I luckily had identified that this idea of hours is broken. And a lot of accounting firms don't have good systems. Like they just don't do things that help them out to be more efficient. And so when I started my firm, I said I refuse to put my team through the same crap that I had dealt with. And so luckily, we've been able to do this in our firm for quite a few years. The last 3 years, we've averaged about 42 hours a week during tax season.
42 hours a week in busy
In busy
season.
season. Yeah.
That's fantastic. Okay. Wow. So what are you doing that's different than a traditional firm to make that possible?
Probably the obvious one is I hire more people. It is a numbers game. We're accountants, but somehow we don't translate the numbers game to the way we run our business. Like one accountant can really handle X amount of clients. And it's not like a fixed formula because some clients have bigger needs. So you do have to look at those things, but there's only so much time in a day. So one accountant can only handle so many people. And when they're full, we need to stop filling them up and we just need to hire more people. So theoretically, we operate about a 20% margin. That's lower than a lot of the other firms because I'm paying higher labor costs to have the people around. For me, it's more of a long game though.
You say it's lower, but I thought what margin are you talking about? Because is that like a gross margin? Is that a
That's
net?
net.
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 Yeah, because 20% profitability is is
I,
not bad.
I think it's awesome.
Yeah.
I feel like other accounting firms are potentially in the 30s.
Mm. But that's misleading because often the owners are working crazy hours,
For sure.
55 plus, right? And if you actually back out the time they're spending that they're not billing, then and they actually got paid for that, then that comes
Agree.
out of the profit, right?
Very misleading. In fact, it's funny when I was interviewing accountants for this book, it took me 2 years to write. So there was a lot of development time in between. And I'd share the concept, and they're very proudly like, "Oh, I'm doing that for my team." For your That's interesting. You're doing that for your team. How many hours are you working? Oh, yeah, yeah. I work 70 hours as the owner. Like you do know that's not sustainable. And I mean, even if you look at your work product, what is your work product like after working 10 hours straight? I mean, are you kidding me? Like, come on, guys.
Yeah. It's funny because I've interviewed a good number of senior folks on this show, people who made partner at the Big 4 and lived their entire lives pretty much in public accounting. And it's so hard for them to understand the idea that you can be successful and not work more than 50 hours a week and not dedicate your entire life, more than what is normal. It has become normalized in this culture to work that hard. And if you don't, it's somehow like it's a badge of honor to work that many hours. And
Yeah,
the converse is true as well, right? If you don't, you're seen as a slacker. And I tell them like I don't want to work that much. My goal is to work fewer than 30 hours a week. And I it kind of like when I say that, they're like judging me for it.
100%.
But
We have to get past that badge of honor, right? That's a problem that they've accepted because we're talking. I mean, if you look at the development of the tax code and government agency and like how accounting firms came about, we're talking 100 years at least of this kind of like, well, yeah, we have to work a lot of hours. Well, that was one of the main motivations. I want to change that badge of honor that people feel like and then judge others because they're not working 80 hours. Like, I mean, I have a such a great life. I could do this running my firm the way I do it till if I don't need to retire. I don't even need to look forward to it
Right.
because I can build those things in. And so I'm hoping with the book that the accounting industry can maybe look at it and say, yeah, let me try this out. I wonder if it'll work for me.
I I'm guessing you don't bill by the hour in your firm? Or are you able to
Uh,
do that and use this method?
no, I mean, you could. I don't necessarily think billable hours is actually a great way to bill in general. I like value pricing or fixed pricing. Obviously, there's some things like when we're doing bookkeeping cleanup work that we do bill hourly for that.
Tough to scope, right? So
Yeah,
just
exactly.
say we'll do it hourly, but the
Yeah.
ongoing stuff, right?
But the ongoing, the most of the stuff we know what the work looks like.
Yeah.
We know what the value is to the client. And so we'd rather incentivize ourselves to learn how to be more efficient instead of rewarding butts in the seat and wasting time
Yeah.
on something.
I feel like this issue with the overwork is very much tied to the billable hours and the timesheets because the firm's financial results, the revenue, the profit to the partners is all linked to how many hours people bill. And so that's the incentive, right? All the incentives are designed so that people overwork. And
You're right.
the thing that's really shocking to me is that these days, as you move up the ladder of the firm, because the firms have realized they can't recruit people if they bring them in and start working them 55 hours a week right away, the interns work the least. The junior staff work a little bit more. The seniors work a lot more. The managers and directors work more, and the partners are actually billing the most hours, 50 plus on average, according to some crowdsourced data that I've seen.
Yeah, which is ironic, right? Because you're kind of sold as the entry level or intern that, hey, this you want to go make partner. The
Right,
partner's perfect.
right.
And they because they're thinking, oh yeah, I'd love to not work this many hours. I could be a partner. Partners don't work that much. And yeah, the data doesn't support that. The data supports partners work at least as much as they were working prior to becoming a partner. And most end up working more.
Yeah. I wonder about the managing partners. Like once you get out of client service, do you actually get to have a balanced life? But I don't know. Maybe by that time, you're so enmeshed and working all the time
I
that
mean,
it's
you're
hard.
talking what 30, 40 years of
It's
behavioral
conditioning.
modification.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, so my dad was, he was a corporate guy, right? He worked at a company, professional job, and it was very much if you wanted to succeed, you were in the office from 8 to 8 kind of situation. So we didn't see him a lot on the weekdays. And it's funny because when he finally went to work for himself, he still kept that routine, even though he didn't have to, right? He like couldn't not have his laptop around.
Yeah.
So let's I want to dive into the 3.3 method
Okay.
more. So you said at most 3 hours of work,
Uh-huh.
and then you take 30% for rest. Like take me through like your day. How does that work in a day of your life?
Yeah. So I think it's important. So there's three generic approaches first, and then I'll kind of get into how
Okay.
people apply it. Some people might be more like a sprinter. So when I was doing this, one of my good friends is Mike Michalowicz, who wrote Profit First. And as a very accomplished author, I obviously picked his brain a lot. And he said it's interesting as he's reading my stuff. He's like, when he's in his writing seasons, he's like, I write for about 55 minutes and I take about 20 minutes off, which happens to be this 3.3 rule. He just naturally figured out that he's focused that way. So Mike's a sprinter because he could probably handle up to an hour. And then he admitted, with his admitted stuff of, I can't remember what he called it, but Not
I'm
necessarily in,
impressed that he makes it an hour knowing him. That's
yeah,
good. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, he's kind of all over the place with
Yeah.
how fast he moves on
I
things.
say that with love, Mike.
And so then the next person is someone who probably can last a little bit longer. So we call them a jogger. Maybe that's an hour and a half to 2 hours. And then someone who maybe is like, dude, I don't have a problem sitting down and focusing. I'm a Zen master. So I go full 3 hours. So we just kind of lay out as a general way to explain and help illustrate this is how many hours that person would work and they take this much time off. But the reality is, we don't all get the tasks that we have to do that are the ones that we enjoy the most. There's elements of running your firm or being a team member that you got some things you don't like to do. In
Yeah.
those cases, a lot of
They're
times,
sitting at the bottom of my list right now.
yeah,
Yeah.
a lot of those times, the better approach is a kind of a sprinter approach. So, yeah, again, you asked me to do some forecasting. I love that stuff. I could do 3 straight hours. You want me to get on the phone and talk to people? I'm going to be more of a like, I'm going to need a break every 45 minutes or so.
Hmm.
Um, and so it does depend on the task. I don't know if you're familiar with the book Deep Work by Cal Newport, but I kind of feel like my book just picks up where his left off. He talks about there's deep work and there's frenetic work. And I feel like his argument with his background is kind of like, let's make sure we always find the deep work. And running a practice,
Yeah. It's not always.
you cannot get rid of the frenetic work.
Yeah.
It happens. And so some of your team members have 90% of responsibilities on their plate that's frenetic and shallow. So we have to adjust. So for me, I either like to take time at the end of the day to look at tomorrow or first thing when I sit down for the day, like, how is my day flowing? What do I have based on, okay, these things that I need to happen? I know I'm probably going to likely need a break here. And so I give myself kind of a format for each day. Just, okay, I have 2 back-to-back meetings. I know I'm going to need a break after that. I need to write a blog post. Okay. I know I'm going to need a break after that. And I know that more than an hour and a half is not good for me. So if I don't finish it in an hour and a half, then I'm probably going to need to move it to a different day.
So are
And
you
add,
putting this on your calendar, like the
uh-huh.
breaks?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's important. So that way you just, it's fluid. It's a very principle based science as opposed to like, I don't know if people are familiar with the Pomodoro technique.
Yes. That's the one I like to use that one because it's so short.
Yeah, it's
Right.
like 20 minutes on, 5
Yeah.
minutes off, and you do that 3 times, and then the 4th time, you take a full 30-minute break.
Yeah.
Um, the challenge with that, though, is if you find yourself in a zone when that tomato timer goes off or whatever timer we use
Then
these
I
days.
ignore it, right? And it breaks
Yeah,
my
but it
method.
could break your concentration
Yeah.
anyways, and so it is a little bit too rigid, and that's why I wanted to take the science and just say, look, it's up to 3 hours. More than that, even if you're in the zone, studies would show that your productivity is going to drop off anyways. So you might as well take the break and come back more efficient.
You mentioned the science, and you've got a stat in your book that is sticking in my brain, which is something about how like an office worker in a typical 8 hour a day kind of job really is only productive for about 3 hours.
Two
Is that
hours and 53 minutes.
2 hours
Yeah.
and 53 minutes? Where did that come from?
A study done in the UK.
Wow.
Yeah. They looked
Yeah.
at 2,000 workers and 2 hours and 53 minutes of productivity.
And so what are they doing the rest of the time?
I mean, think about it psychology wise. Like we sit down, your team member sits down, and like, oh, I got 8 hours to do. Like I'm going to hear beef for 8 hours. Oh, this task, yeah, it's kind of good. Like you're kind of meandering.
Right.
It's just, I'm trying to suffer through the day is a lot of our team members' attitudes.
I
And
guess
so then
meetings would be in there too, right?
yeah. And oh,
Yeah.
distraction. Oh, yeah. That's a good distraction, you know, versus if you start giving people permission to take a break. And during that break, you do absolutely nothing work related. Now all of a sudden it's like, oh, I know I'm going to get a break. I'm going to stay focused on this task right now. Even like with the blog post thing. I don't consider myself an author. It's hard for me. I do a lot of editing. A lot of great people in my life who taught me some things, but like it's about getting stuff on paper and editing. It's hard. And so if I know that I only have an hour and a half to get it done, I actually am more productive than saying, this is the only thing I have to accomplish today. Because that means I'm going to take all day and let any distraction get in my way until 4:50 when it's like, oh crap, I have 10 minutes before I'm going to leave and go home for dinner. Oh no, now I can't fit it in.
So the average worker is productive less than 3 hours a day. What's the benefit of this method?
So you double their productivity. When you give them a structure that says, I want you focused for this time, or really you say, here's the principle based on your task you're doing. How long do you want to do that? And then take your breaks. Like then the psychological relief of that, which normally they feel guilty, they no longer have guilt anymore because there's permission to not work, even
Right.
while they're at work. So they come back, their brain resets, and now they actually come back to another productive work block. It's that reset that's the most important element
Yeah.
of the rule.
For me, my reset is exercise. If
It's a
I
great reset.
My rule is if I start in the morning and I start at 8:30 and I get a solid couple hours of work in, or 3 hours, I give myself permission to take an early lunch and go and swim, you
Yeah,
know? And when I come back after an hour or 2, it's like a new day.
totally.
Yeah. So you're aiming for your people to work a productive 6 hours versus a very unproductive 8 or more
8 hours.
hours.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And that's the thing the timesheets, like, don't show us is how productive are those hours actually.
right. And
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things that I just disliked about the Deloitte billable model. So I'm not trying to be offensive to anyone who's doing the billable model, but this
No,
is
that's
what I do.
okay. You can offend them. I don't
Okay.
mind. They
I,
can write
I
to me. Send your emails to Blake at earmark.me as the host.
I noticed even as a young accountant, like, my goodness, I'm going to get rewarded based on billable hours, but I don't control my workflow.
Right.
There was like 1 to 2 people in the entire office who controlled the workflow. So if they handed me one thing and I got through it efficiently, now I have to be inefficient walking around begging for work from other partners versus, oh, you give me 6 things to do. Like, yeah, I'm going to crank through it. So, and you know who eats that inefficiency in the billing is the client. How is that fair to the client? They're not getting a better work product because someone spent more billable hours on it.
No. Arguably worse.
And if you look at why we exist, clients pay our bills.
Mhm.
They are the reason we can stay in business. I kind of feel like we should be customer centric on that. And I just don't think the billable hour does that for us.
I agree. So you tell a story in your book about when you were a controller at was it Atlas?
Atlas, yeah.
Yeah. So what happened there with the hustle culture?
Oh man. There so a little background, door-to-door sales company. And if anyone isn't familiar, I'm here in Utah, and Utah County is kind of the mecca for door-to-door sales companies. They're just all over the place. You've probably seen Vivint as a sponsor. They started as a company called Apex, got investing, but they were our competitor at the time. And so I
Like,
was the first
I'm sorry, when like people going door to door ringing doorbells?
summer sales. Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, buy DirecTV. Hey, buy Dish. Hey, buy
Do
Pest Control.
do people still like answer the door for that sort of thing? Because now, like, we have a Ring doorbell, so I don't get surprised by door to door salesmen anymore.
Yeah, certain areas apparently. I don't
Wow.
know how those people are adjusting. But at the time, it was Ring didn't exist.
So yeah, maybe they're struggling now.
Yeah.
Okay, I got
It's
it.
so I was the first controller in I joined them in their 5th year of existence. I was the first controller who actually had an accounting degree. And so I looked at everything and I suggested this crazy idea to them. They're like, "Wait, what's going on?" I go, "Yeah, yeah. It's really catching on in the business world. They're calling it a budget." And they're like, "Oh, we don't need a budget. We'll just sell more." So there was this idea of like, I can just hustle and sell more.
Right.
I'm going to keep selling. And you know what? it didn't work. The company actually went belly up, declared bankruptcy.
Focusing on top line revenue. Sounds kind of like accounting firms in a lot of cases, right? It's
Right.
all about top line revenue. It's funny that we do that, right? Considering that we are the experts at calculating profit.
Yeah.
Like, but in our own firms, we don't focus on the profit as much as on the top line revenue and all the metrics that we like analyze firms by. It's like headcount and revenue. That's how they come up with the list of the top 100 firms. And I'm thinking, like, I mean, you could be a huge firm and have a lot of people and a lot of revenue, but you might not be that profitable.
Yeah. It's funny you bring up the top 100 firms. We really ought to look at the criteria for some of these things. A lot of them are just popularity contests. I mean, I remember in my writing the book, I studied like great places to work. There's even an organization. I'm pretty confident they're a nonprofit, greatplacesToWork.org or something like that. And so then they rake all these companies, and sure enough, the big four fall into like the top 50 of greatest places to work. And you look at the reasons why, and it's like, because it's a great place to work because I like the people I work with. Like, no one is looking at the factor of what's work life harmony look like to these people. No, that's not a factor. And if it's a great place to work based on their criteria, and I feel like it should be.
Yeah. I've always wondered about that. How do the big four firms always get on the top of these like great places to work lists? You know, they may have all this PTO, but people don't take it, right?
Right, because you get fired if you do.
Right. So, you know, yeah, I just it's interesting to me. But then also, like, we have to remember these firms are massive, and so like the audit and the tax team are very different than the consulting team,
Sure.
and the consulting
Yeah.
is actually bigger now. So I don't
And they
know.
keep creating new things and they buy other companies. And so, yeah, maybe some of those departments, which to us as small business owners is a completely different company.
Yeah.
Some of those, they're really a conglomerate at this point with the variety of things. Yeah, maybe they're only talking to the consultants who work 30 hours a week and get to get drunk on the company's dime. Like, this place is
Yeah.
great to work.
You know, with AI, it's a great time to be a consultant. It can make your PowerPoints for you. It can make up your talking points for you. It can
I,
I mean, we're gonna automate consultants out of a job pretty soon. I feel like.
I agree with you. I actually did a CE that a guy did some AI stuff for, and he's like, watch this. And he typed in some things. He's like, look what it produced. We would spend 2 weeks producing this report and we'd bill the client for $200,000. And I showed you how to do it with a 30-second prompt.
Yeah.
It's like,
So that it could also be our savior, right? That could be the end of the billable hour because, you know,
it could
once
be.
could maybe like once I mean, for me it was anyway, like in bookkeeping. You know, I had a bookkeeping practice basically. We didn't call it that because we wanted respect. But essentially, we were putting together the books for our clients, some
Yeah.
virtual controller stuff too. And when cloud-based accounting came along, it cut the workload by 80%. So what did we do? Well, we're not going to bill 80% less. We fixed the fees and we shared the benefit with the clients. Maybe that'll happen with audit and tax is my hope, and that can help
Maybe,
start.
John Maynard Keynes, I quote him in the book. He actually, I wish I could remember the exact date, but early 1900s, I think, or maybe 1940-ish. He's like, based on the evolution of technology, his prediction was we would be working at the turn of the century 14-hour days or 15-hour
Right.
days or something like that. Um,
Wait,
I think
you mean
we
weeks, right?
15 hours per week.
Okay.
Sorry. Yeah. 15 hours per week. And I think he underestimated, and we're probably going to underestimate the human's ability to fill space, to fill the time with
Yeah.
more stuff because we don't set up boundaries. We've been trained, and people are like, this is how it is. And if they do it for so long, they have to give themselves a pattern interrupt. And I'm hoping the 3.3 rule can be that pattern interrupt for them.
Well, and maybe he wasn't wrong in that if somebody was willing to live to the same standard of living that Keynes had, you could do that working very little these days. It doesn't cost that much to have that standard of living now. But if you want all the things, if you want the massive house, you know, I know people with, a family of 4 living in a 4,000, 5,000 square foot home. Some people think that's what I gotta have now. And it's absurd if you compare how people were living just a few decades ago
Yeah.
or in other parts of the world, right? You don't need that. It's not necessary, but for some reason, the more money you make, the more you have, the more you want, right?
Right. Cause we let our personal living expenses increase at the same
Exactly.
pace, not faster than our income.
And that's what's so fascinating to me about the whole partner mentality in these bigger accounting firms is that, the partners at a big firm, they're making on average, uh, at the biggest, $800,000 a year. Now they could work half as much and earn $400,000 a year
Which
if
still seems pretty nice for most people.
if they let themselves, and I think most people would agree that you could live very comfortably on that amount, and
I
I'm
think
willing to
I think
bet
they would agree, yeah.
I'm willing to bet those partners would not, because
Yeah,
they're whatever
it's
they're spending their money on has, become a necessity, right? So, I think there's also that sort of, like, broader social mindset shift. I feel like Gen Z is starting to embrace that.
yeah.
Maybe that's because they realize they'll never be able to afford a house, or they think that they will never be able to afford a house.
But at the same
So,
time, to a point you made earlier, Gen Z might be embodying that now, but then what do all of the other generations classify them as? They've labeled them as lazy.
lazy, yeah. I like to think of myself as a lazy CPA because I don't wanna work a lot. I wanna work as little as possible,
Yeah,
and that pisses some people off. I don't know why. It must like, why does it bother you if I don't work as much? But I
yeah,
think it sort of, like, goes against the grain.
yeah.
So what's your personal goal, John? Like, how much do you aim to do every day?
I get into the office about 10 a.m. ish. My morning routine, I do exercise in the morning and then I leave by 5. I'm home for dinner most nights. I don't travel a ton. And my goal is still to figure out how to cut back even what I
Yeah.
am doing right now.
How much exercise do you get?
Work out 5 times a week.
Yeah? How long?
So Monday, Wednesday, Friday are strength training, and those are about hours long sessions. And then Tuesday, Thursday, and occasionally a Saturday is cardio. And
Yeah.
I try to go for about 45, 50 minutes.
That's great.
Yeah.
Um,
My problem is my eating habits. I like sugar a little bit too much.
mm,
Still
like
trying to figure that out.
most of us. Doesn't help that they put it in all the food,
All
right?
the food,
All
even
the
in
food.
like sauces.
Yeah. So it's everywhere. My
Yeah.
wife and I just went to Disney World, with our son for a week, and, we've cut back, and the hardest part about it was that everything was so sugary, at that park, and it's just almost shocking, actually, if you kinda take a break from eating a lot of sugar and then you go to
Yeah.
a place like that.
I wish
It's
that were true for me. There was a time
yeah.
period, I went from January 1st to September 28th. I didn't eat sugar at all. Now, I didn't stop from eating other foods that probably had sugar in it. I just didn't eat obvious sugar. Uh, September 29th, I had no problem just popping in the sugar. Felt great. I have a real problem.
Well, it's the first step is
Is the brain.
acknowledging that you have a problem.
Yeah.
Uh, for me, it was like it's great to hear that you're exercising a lot, and I feel like that's one of the biggest benefits of adopting this kind of methodology or mindset about work is that it gives you time for exercise, and you don't have to
Yep.
feel guilty about that either. And I started back in September, and it's what we are recording in May. I started just like swimming every day I can, which I can do because I live in Arizona. So even in the winter, right, I can go. And it's been life changing for me to be exercising like an hour and a half on average every day.
Nice.
I feel so much more productive when I do work. And so like that's why I love your theory.
Yeah. The
Be-
science also supports that. And it's
yeah.
interesting, even in my own firm, where we were arguably the first firm that started doing this. I'm the one pushing it. And I still get team members during tax season. I'm like, because we try to work out together. In fact, I incentivize them. If you come and work out 3 times a week with the group, I'll pay for your gym membership and I'll give you the hour credit of work. And it's amazing how the group gets really small during tax season. I'm like, where are you guys? Well, I just got so much work to do. I'm like, you do know you'll be more productive.
You've actually made exercise part of the job, like, if they want it to be. Yeah,
Yes.
that's amazing. Well, it's really hard when you have all
It,
that. I mean, I guess for me, I've sort of just embraced this mindset that as a startup founder, as a small business owner, there's always work. You will never get through the list. It's infinite.
it's never ending.
So for me, the big mindset shift was reprioritizing so that exercise, taking care of my health is at the top, and then I've got my family and my friends because that's important too, you know. And then there's work. And that doesn't mean that work is not a priority, but I have to take care of my health every day and I have to spend time with the people that I care about every day.
Yeah. But it's interesting though, when you're doing that, my guess is when you work,
Yes.
right? That's people are like, well, you're gonna breed entitlement and people are like, everyone's lazy, they're gonna take advantage of you. It's like there's still a pace that my team members need to work at. And if they don't, they're not fit for this culture. And frankly, they're not fit for public accounting. When you
Yes.
work, you got to work. And so you have a scoreboard and you track that. But because you work when you work, you also now can take the time to be healthy. But the reverse is true. If I take the time to be healthy, I now know when I work, I can work instead of just, oh, I got 8 hours in front of me, I got
Yeah.
12 hours in front of me.
So that's, I think, one of the biggest barriers to changing this in a firm is firm owners will say, well, if I'm not tracking the time that people are working, how do I motivate them to, like, be productive? Especially if I'm saying it's okay to only work 6 hours a day. Do you have like, how do you measure the productivity of your people if it's not hours that they're sitting at their desk?
Yeah, super important that we actually utilize job descriptions. Job descriptions should lay out what are the tasks the person's responsible for, and how does your team member know that they're doing a good job? Because our no one wants to suck. No one comes into work on purpose saying, "I'm going to blow it today. I'm going to be terrible." They want approval, even if they don't physically act like it. I have a daughter, my middle daughter. She is that person. It's like, I know you care. I know you care. You and sometimes you have team members like that. And so, as part of that, okay, here's your job description. Whatever that is, let's come up with metrics so that you know. And so, a tax person who's brand new is going to have less tax returns I need them to prep every day compared to an experienced accountant who's going to have more returns I need them to review every day.
Mhm.
Same with bookkeepers, right? And so, it's really important as the owner that you look at what is the thing they're doing, and based on my estimation, what would they do that I say, man, good job?
So you're
Give them that
get
metric.
so it's not you're not taking away the metric. You're just changing it from, "Here's the hours that I put in," to, "Here's the tax returns that I completed."
Yeah. We're trying to focus on result based metrics as opposed to input
Mhm.
based metrics.
I love that so much. And it's great too because it's if you set it up right, certain things are easier than others, right?
Yeah.
But if you set it up right, then it's pretty easy to see who's productive, right? And who's not. But if you just have a bunch of hours, right, you have no real idea
Yeah. And
because.
if anyone's like, oh, it's just going to be hard to track, there are so many inexpensive solutions out there. Almost every CRM these days, you need to track your clients. You should be able to produce a list of that. Most of them also have some sort of project management function of
Mhm.
it. And you can run reports on that project management, start date, end date.
Yeah,
I mean, it's just don't let what feels like an elephant, if you haven't done any of this yet, to get in the way of like implementing this, because it's game changer. It really
yeah.
is.
It's great. I can see it with my team when I set it up right that the productivity goes up. And I know personally it works because if I start work and I know that I have these 4 CPE courses to review, I'm done, right? After I get those 4 done. So I'm going to work quickly to get them done and efficiently. Whereas if I have the whole day to do it, I'll take the whole day.
Right.
So with tax, you're doing tax. What other kinds of work are you doing on an
Yeah.
ongoing
So
basis?
tax, bookkeeping, we do cash flow management, the profit first methodology.
Cool.
Yeah.
So
Those are
with
the main ones.
bookkeeping in my firm, the way I measured capacity was with just basically how many clients are you managing? How many,
Huh?
monthly reconciliations do you have to do? And we kind of got a rough idea after a certain amount of time a bookkeeper could handle based on our size client, 20, 30 clients.
Yeah. So it's very similar. We have 3 ratings for clients though, based on complexity to simplicity.
Mm.
And so someone, if they have all simple clients, could technically manage more simple clients, but they have complex clients in there. It's kind of like, every complex client is worth 3 simple clients, but the exact same concept.
Now that makes sense, right? You've got weighting there.
Yeah.
That's good. That's even more sophisticated, but it doesn't seem like it would be too difficult
No,
to put
it's
in
pretty easy.
place.
But
Yeah.
again, it comes down to there's a certain amount of work that needs to get done, and there's only so many hours, labor hours we have as a service based company. And so I don't want to push my person to 150, 200% capacity before I decide to hire. I actually want to have them at 80% capacity almost all the time
Oh yeah,
because
yeah.
we need that 20% break, that flexibility. One, it allows
Mhm.
us to give them the 30% recovery period. But then sometimes emergencies happen. I've had team members like he just woke up one day and the base of his spine pinched the base of his nerves and he lost complete sensation in his legs. And it took
Wow.
him 4 months to recover. So, man, our bookkeeping team had to step up and take on his work. And, you know, the 3.3 rule is not saying none of that's going to ever happen again, but it gives us that space that allows us to adjust without
Right.
really freaking out.
Yeah. Yeah, because if you're at 110% all the time, then if somebody quits, the team is really screwed,
Right.
or it gets hurt or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
Building capacity, and that's so important. Any other like nitty-gritty details in like how to make this effective in implementing into a firm, Like I love that kind of like practical advice.
You know, if someone's listening to the one, obviously selfishly, the book has a lot of details on it.
Yes. Do you have a
um,
copy you can hold up?
I actually not accessible.
Where
No.
where can people get the book?
Amazon's the easiest place. The 3.3 rule. I think if you Google it, it should even be one of the top searches. But man, if you're like, this sounds good, I hope you guys try it out. And when you introduce it to your team, they're going to be weirded out. My team was. I'm like, okay, here's what we're going to try now. And they're like, is this like a trick to get like so you can fire me because you're going to catch me not working? And that's hard to get by. Like even me, I did the science, I looked at it, I was living it myself. I'm like, okay, I'm going to let these guys work basically 6 hours, but I'm going to pay them for 8. As an accountant, as from an efficiency standpoint, it's hard, but at least I had the data that backed up like they're only giving me 2 hours and 53 minutes on
Right.
average anyways.
Yeah, your timesheets are not real. You're only
Yeah.
getting 3 hours of
So
productive
I'm actually
work.
good at double. The 6 hours is
Yeah.
double the productivity for the same cost. So
That's
that
the
helped me.
that's the what people have to get over.
Yeah. So that helped me
Yeah.
get over that hump. But then is like, you have to then be the visionary and leader for that team and encourage them. It's like, hey, I see you're on a break. What are you doing? Uh, cool. Good job. You cannot give any sort of hint like, what are you doing? I'm on a break. Oh, you're on your break. Do you think you earned your break? Like you have to get them comfortable with this idea because they also are going to be everybody's in the entire industry has been trained
Yeah.
that the way it is to just work until you die straight, squeeze the soul out of people.
And I'll admit, it's sometimes I feel guilty, when I'm out there in the middle of the day doing my thing, enjoying paradise
Yeah. Feel
in the
guilty, huh?
desert here. I feel a little guilty. But then I just post on Instagram and make everybody else feel bad, and then I feel better.
Yeah. Great. Yeah. It's good.
uh, John, it has been so great talking to you. Listeners, go find the 3.3 book on Amazon. We'll have the link in the show notes as well. And John, where do you like to hang out online?
LinkedIn's great. That's probably the place I personally hang in the most.
Cool.
Yeah. But our firm, we have a team. And so we have stuff on Facebook and all that stuff.
Are you hiring?
We are always hiring. I have like 20 open accounting positions right now.
Okay. Where can our listeners find those? What's the website?
Incitetax.com/career.
Cool.
Or you can just message me on LinkedIn.
John Briggs with 2 G's.
2 G's. Yep.
Cool. John, great talking to you, and hope to see you around.
Yeah. Thanks, Blake.
Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode and that you learned something new. And if you did, wouldn't it be nice to get some CPE credit for it? Well, I've got great news. My new app, Earmark CPE, offers free NASBA-approved CPE credits for listening to podcasts, including this one. Visit earmarkcpe.com to download the app, take a short quiz, and get your CPE certificate. That's earmarkcpe.com.